Welcome in for another episode of Phone It In right here on Sobros Network. Mine's right, ass is tight as we tackle the monumental episode 60 for you today. I'll be your host for the show, the EIC at SobrosNetwork.com. Big Natural Stony Keeley. You can follow me on Twitter at Stony Keeley. Collectively, we are at Sobros Network wherever you consume your fine social media. Joined as usual by the star of the show herself. She puts it all together for us. We are who? She is. She is the cryptid queen, Rooster. Rooster, how you doing today?
Hello, I'm fine. Hanging in there. Yeah, been a busy, crazy day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, those happen from time to time, but we're here. We are going to be talking about a discussion that I feel like could go all night long.
Yes.
It's a very, very deep, very broad topic. This is something that I think is going to be challenging for us, the way that we like to talk. Challenging for us to keep in digestible form because it is one of those big, big topics. We're going to be talking about the missing 411. So, what was it about this topic that you wanted to hit this week?
Okay, so we've kind of talked about it a little bit before. We've mentioned like the missing caves, or like the cave system coupled with missing 411 stuff.
But the Teddy Roosevelt created the national parks
all the way back then,
to protect Bigfoot. That episode, yeah.
So I thought, well, let's do it. And you mentioned we could bring Ryan on because he would know a lot about this.
Yeah, avid outdoorsman, our resident expert camper. And you know what? Listen, it couldn't have worked out any better because it is Memorial Day weekend on the horizon, and people are going to start getting out and about, visiting the national parks. 'Tis the season. So lined up perfectly from a timing standpoint. And yeah, if you're watching with us live on YouTube, well, first of all, get into those comments. Let us know what you're drinking, what you're thinking, all that stuff, and we'll get to it as they come in. But if you are watching on YouTube, you notice there's a third box on the screen. There's a guy at the bottom that's not usually here, and that is our very own resident outdoorsman. I like that position title. I just came up with that on the fly, by the way.
Sounds
Ryan,
nice.
better known on social media at Outdoor Sobro. Ryan, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm well, thank you guys. It's beautiful weather down here in Nashville, and I'm excited about the topic, excited about the discussion. I'm a big fan of the show, so I'm extremely happy to be on. I try to tune in every week, at least for a few minutes here and there. Like Stoney said, I'm kind of the resident outdoors guy at the site, but I'm a little more indoor nowadays due to certain situations with family and jobs and things, but I do still try to get out when we can, and there's just going through a transition, and it's still my favorite thing to do, and I look forward to getting out when I can. But I do have literally decades of outdoor experience, and I'm happy to have this discussion and hopefully provide a little bit of personal experience and insight.
What's the coolest place you've ever gone camping, in your opinion?
Ooh, there's been a lot, but I would say like just the coolest, and I wish it wasn't so crowded, and it's even worse since COVID. Yosemite National Park. I mean, it was crowded before. I mean, it's a national park, and it's one of the probably the coolest. But when you get down into the valley and you see it's you can get down in a valley around mountains, and they can be steep mountains, but there's an angle to it. But in Yosemite, it is just like 90-degree straight up cliff. It's like being in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but it's 3-4 times higher than that. Like it's just but I guess glaciers had carved it out years ago.
Is it really?
I'm pretty sure it's
Wow.
glacier. Yeah, it is. And then we went. This was like 2017, 2018, and when we were when we were there, they were doing controlled burns. So there was like just the whole area. Thankfully, it wasn't like overwhelming, but it just kind of had this mist with the fog.
Mm.
It was smoke, but kind of gave it like this fog mystic look. It just looked way cooler. But the weather's beautiful. It's mid to northern California area. I guess that's technically northern California. It's like mid northern. They got a little pizza place with beer and stuff down on the bottom next to some campsites and stuff. Like it's just a beautiful place to be. But other than that, I mean, I don't think there's a bad place to camp, except for the tent cities around metropolitan areas. That's probably a pretty bad place to camp.
Have you ever gotten lost out there?
Question.
Ooh, that is a great question. I wouldn't say lost. Me and my hunting partner got stuck in Colorado. I would say stuck deep into the backcountry in Colorado in 2020. And thankfully, I was able to hike out a little ways and flag down some guys that helped us. And we were able to get everything out. And we took a truck into a spot that we shouldn't have. We just didn't know. By the map, it seemed fine, and it was not unadvised, but just erosion over the years made it. We got to a spot where we couldn't get out, and we were able to get out thanks to these guys, and we still had a few days of hunting ahead of us, and we had a good time. But that was the closest like panic that I had.
So in that, you guys were your truck got stuck.
It wasn't like it was. We were down a mountain we shouldn't have been on. It was on a road, like a dirt road, but the rocks that were sticking out on most of the steep inclines were just impassable once we got past down them. And we had those guys that came and helped. We just had to stack up a whole bunch of smaller size rocks to kind of make a ramp, like on every incline. So it was just like it was a full day of like moving rocks to make makeshift ramps to get the truck out. But like it was a situation where we just didn't have service. We didn't have like a GPS sat phone or anything, but it was right in the middle of, or the next day the elk season started, and that's why we're there. And I mean, we had firearms, we had all our camping stuff, we had our food. Like we were not in a bad situation, other than the fact that our vehicle that we drove way across the country in was stuck in the side of this mountain. And like, we were seriously pondering, like, okay, if we hike out of here, the truck stays, and then what? Like, so it was just like we went through a lot of scenarios in a very short amount of time. That was, and more the stress on that one. Like I said, we weren't like in a bad survival situation. We were covered, and we were capable dudes. The stress was the finance side of it, the time side of it, the wives back home side of it, not getting contact from us. And so that was the stress to it. But other than that, no, fortunately things have been okay. And my training and upbringing, I feel like, has been like, try to be a good planner. I'm a Boy Scout, I'm an Eagle Scout, our motto is be prepared. So, I don't want to jinx it going forward, but something I always try to keep in the back of my head.
I got lost in the woods once.
Did you really?
Yeah. And it was
like behind your house, or?
Yeah. So two of my buddies came over. We were in high school at the time, and we thought it would be cool. The house I grew up in is next to hundreds of acres of woods. I mean, you could walk for miles through those things before you hit the next road over. You find somebody's house. And we kind of thought, like, there's a really neat creek back there, which might not sound like much to some of our viewers, but you grow up in Gladeville, Tennessee, finding a creek in the woods is pretty awesome. So we thought we would go back there and just, dick around. We're teenagers in high school. We're going to throw rocks and pick up crawfish and stuff like that. But then we got kind of curious about what else was in the vicinity, so we decided we were going to go a little bit deeper into the woods. And about 6 hours later, the sun started to set and we were still turned around. Somehow came out of the woods about a mile up the road from my house, but we made it to somebody's backyard and walked through and realized we were on the road that the house is on, and we just walked back that way. But I do remember thinking, I mean, I'm not an outdoorsman by any stretch of the imagination, but I do remember thinking, like, damn, I guess this can happen pretty easily
It can,
if
yeah.
if you're not paying attention. So that's my story. It's a lot, not
I
really
didn't
as
realize that the land there was that vast. We've always talked
yeah.
about the stories in your woods. I tried to stay out of your woods for the haunted reasons. Um,
Yeah.
It's just
but
famous for being haunted.
yeah,
Yeah, there's been some crazy stuff that have happened out in that woods. Out in that woods. Both explainable and both not. But that was a case where we were just dumb kids that got turned around, and we very much did not want to get stuck in the woods at night. There's been some weird noises out there. Yeah. Ryan, I don't know if we ever told you this. We're just completely down a rabbit hole now, but
It's fine.
we looked at where the house is on a map, our friend Mac and I, and it's kind of close to like where the Trail of Tears went through.
yeah, we've talked about that, and we've
I remember
talked
this
about
coming.
the proximity to the cave system is really not too far from there either.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that there's some merit there in that conversation.
Some ley line
Okay.
activity going on.
Well, so
I hope my mother's not watching. She still has to sleep there every night. So,
well, I mean, if she's still sleeping there, we've talked about it before. It's come up. We've talked about it.
yeah,
Your
you're right.
creepy
You're right.
woods. But okay, so Ryan, do you believe in Bigfoot?
I don't not believe in him. I
Okay.
think I'm not. I don't know if I believe like I have theories on everything, and I look at it more of like a percentage. Like if you were like, okay, how much of your weekly salary would you bet on something being real like that? The situation, like any theory, I'd say with Bigfoot, has it ever been real? I'd say like I'd put 80% of my salary on. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Is there currently a live one? I don't know if I'd even be at 50%.
Okay. Okay, that's
Um,
fair.
I'd like for it to be. I just feel like unless we discover, which there's conversations of a separate plane that we
Mm-hmm.
do not exist in, and that some creatures are able to go in and out of. I know that's way out there, but that is pretty
No, that's a fun
popular in
one.
modern conversations. I think that that's possible, and I do like the concept of there being a Bigfoot out there, for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of where I lie. Like I
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
feel like it's totally possible, and we're talking like from a theoretical standpoint. It's possible that there is just something that is bleeding through from another dimension, another plane of existence, whether it's a literal portal that they're just stepping through that they've figured out how to navigate. I kind of feel like it's not some like ancient being that is just an expert at hiding. I kind of feel like there's some sort of network that they've figured out how to use that humans haven't yet. Would be the most
Yeah.
plausible explanation. I'm not saying I actually think that, because it just depends on which day you ask me. But
Yeah. Yeah. I would say most of the time maybe I don't, but I'm unserious enough to be open to it, and I don't care.
Mhm.
So
yeah,
if I saw something run through the woods, I'd be like, well, shit, okay.
I mean, we did that episode on Skinwalker Ranch and the episode on Devil's Den, which this episode I feel like is going to call back to Devil's Den quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did those episodes, and I don't know, just kind of getting into the weeds in that stuff. It just kind of, I don't know. I think there's a path to where it kind of makes sense. That there's just weird spots on Earth where things cross through, crossroads, if you will. All right,
Ley
Rooster.
lines. Okay.
Well, let's get into it then. The missing
Okay.
411.
So, Missing 411 is technically a project by David Pilates. Pilates? I already forgot.
Pilates.
Pilates.
I said Pilates so that we could remember it easier. I ruined it.
I'm not going to remember. It doesn't matter. David, a series of self-published books and 2 documentary films documenting unsolved cases of people who have gone missing in national parks and elsewhere, but mostly national parks.
What is the elsewhere? I don't recall.
I don't know.
Like most public lands, essentially.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
the hunted
okay.
one, or the hunter documentary. It was pretty much all like either BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management, not Black Lives Matter.
Okay, I was about to say what?
Forestry land and stuff like that. So
that makes sense.
that's where you get more of the hunting stuff, because the national parks kind of falls out of that realm, which covers so much more acreage than the national park situation.
Didn't know that.
So, according to David, his work on the subject began when he was doing research in a national park. So he used to be a cop. Just putting that out there. I don't know if it comes up, but he was doing research in a national park, and an off-duty park ranger found him and expressed concern about the questionable nature of some of the missing person cases which occurred in the parks. The ranger knew David's background and asked him to research the issue. David obliged and asserts that he uncovered multiple lines of evidence suggesting negligence on the part of the Park Service in failing to locate the missing people. So I'm not really sure what he's suggesting there. I don't know what kind of negligence we get.
Yeah, there's a bit of pushback from the park services on this. If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken. I might not be recalling this correctly, but a lot of the stories kind of imply that there may have been people that weren't necessarily doing their jobs to the fullest extent. A lot of cases that, again, if I recall correctly, probably should have brushed up on it before doing the show, but alas, here we are. There were, a lot of cases where the implication was that a lot of stuff was just kind of brushed under the rug so that they could wrap up a case nice and neatly.
Okay.
So I don't feel like the park services were very happy that this publication came out.
Yeah, I mean, it always depends, I'm sure. If they're not doing searches, was that the kind of the suggestion, that they're not searching as well as, do they have guidelines? Does anybody know? If
I
there's
don't know.
a normal,
That's a good question.
That's fine. Let's just phone it in. We're not experts.
I mean, if it's in the national park, not a state park system. I mean, that is kind of an across the board federal agency. The national park rangers would be, and I'm sure there is a base guideline. Now, every region, every park's going to have their own leadership differences, I'm sure, but I'm sure there is a guideline, and I think it depends on the park and how much activity they get. Because, like I said, a lot of his investigations go way back. But just in my personal, I was growing up. You typically avoided state and national parks. We would go visit, but as far as being more in it, it's not necessarily, because you're kind of restricted what you can do there. You can enjoy nature, stay on the path, stay in the designated campsite. Those kinds of things wasn't really up our alley. But after marriage and all that, the national parks kind of became our go to. Okay, go check out, because I didn't really grow up going to them. Check out this, check out that. The number of visitors they get, and especially now, the past several years, it's gotten out of control. The traffic is just out of control. You just gotta imagine. And I don't know if you guys ever seen the Instagram page tour-ons of national parks.
No.
And it's just all the people doing stupid stuff caught on camera.
Oh, God.
There. Just teasing bison and elk and stuff, and just getting mauled, in some cases to death. There are so many stupid people.
Oh, yeah.
In general, that then go to these places where they don't have experience, think they can go do a trail or do this and that, or just wander off in the middle of the woods looking for a creek, Stony, and can't find their way back. And so I just got to imagine some of the parks, they are so overwhelmed with issues, and it's probably understaffed for
I was about to say,
some of those facilities.
That's a good point.
can't blame them for not being able to thoroughly do it. But then again, we don't know each case and how well of a job they did. Or are they covering up something else? I didn't say
Yeah.
that.
Bigfoot.
Yeah. Bigfoot. Yeah. I think the cases that I read about the pushback was due to kind of like what you were alluding to a bit, Ryan. The impression that I got was like, hey, we're understaffed. We're doing the best that we can. There's a plausible explanation for this. So what? We didn't like follow up on this or that detail. We have what we need to close the case.
Well,
Kind of
and
deal.
honestly, it seems so hard to find somebody in the woods. Like it just seems like you could just fall off the face of the earth. Like
Yeah.
it really
It,
seems
yeah.
it's scary.
And
Like,
even if you're wearing bright colored clothes, because at that point that's what you rely on
yeah.
is spotting something with your eyes, or if you're
Mhm.
using canines or something, which that's not 100% reliable. But after a few days, in exposure, even in bright colored clothes, if you're wallowing around trying to get back
Yeah, it's
out, you're
gonna be
getting mud on,
dirty.
you're getting dirt.
Mhm.
How long it's been there, you're gonna get leaf foliage coverage. Like that stuff, even bright colored sometimes blends in pretty well. It's got to be extremely difficult. And then national parks aren't always in just like a very boring woods area. A lot of times it
Right.
is mountainous, cliffs, high
Yeah.
desert, like just nuts.
Um, okay, so he broadened his investigation to include missing people from across the world, and this led to his belief that he has uncovered a mysterious series of worldwide disappearances, which he said defied logical and conventional explanations. So I think he originally started with missing children, um, but the ones that I thought were a bit weirder were experienced hikers and hunters. I mean, kids get lost. You know, they wander off. They get lost anywhere. It doesn't
Going
have
to
to
the
be the
mall.
woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, experienced people. That's kind of the more interesting stories to me.
Yeah, and that was something that I wanted to ask Ryan about particularly because I thought the same thing, Rooster. Like i- it's the people that shouldn't go missing that do that are kind of the eeriest when you start reading through some of these stories. So, Ryan, I mean, how easy is this for how easy is this to happen to somebody that is experienced at this point? Like, I mean, what manner of training can you go through to kind of prevent getting lost, so to speak, which is what we're going to run with for now until we get into the alien talk.
That's an interesting topic, but I think it's broached a little bit in his hunting documentary. It's a lot easier than you might think
Okay.
because
Okay.
people
Yeah.
get sloppy.
Mm,
You
Mm,
and you get cocky. You think, "Oh, I've done this 1,000 times. I don't. I've your backpack's gonna get a little lighter each time. You didn't need that
mm,
20 times before. I'm not gonna bring that med kit this time. It's too heavy. I don't need a poncho. I don't think it's gonna rain, or I'll hike back out if there's an issue." So just not being diligent about sticking to a plan, regardless of your experience level. I think that's I I I don't separate someone who's inexperienced with someone who's experienced necessarily. I mean, there
okay.
are some levels of like someone that person really should have done better, and there's some people like that person never should have stepped foot out of the car. But there's a crossover in the middle that I'm like, yeah, I could see that happening. Just before accidents happen. I mean, there's been times I forget if you're, especially if you're rushed or there's multiple things going on. Like I've left stuff out of my pack that I'm like, man, I wish I would have brought that. And I've overpacked way too many times too. I'm like, damn, I wish I wouldn't have brought all this stuff. So, little decisions like that can get you in trouble quick. But also Mother Nature. I shared the experience earlier of, getting stuck. We weren't necessarily lost or in a situation, but had we not had the right provisions and had a group of guys not been within reach that I was able to contact, I mean, we could have been out there for a week or 2 weeks. And depending on how stubborn we were on not leaving our vehicle, it could have turned into a serious situation. Because I left off 2 days, 3 days after that, a blizzard came through, and we were
Mm,
good
back at
gracious.
we were back at our site. We had everything was fine, but had we been in the situation where we're stuck, that could have turned way worse. So
yeah.
experience or not, I mean, Mother Nature doesn't care.
This is terrifying. So like you're basically saying it doesn't even matter. Like you can know what you're doing and you can still
No,
just fuck up so easily. Like I don't want to go
being
out in the woods.
prepared is always going to be a better plan than just half-assing it.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying disaster can still strike, but the better prepared you are, and the reasonably, oh my gosh, being reasonably prepared,
Mhm.
there we go, is always a good game plan. I I don't want to deter anyone from going in, but I'm just saying when people are surprised, like, oh, he's done this all his life. Well, now he's 72 years old, and maybe you should
Right.
think,
Well,
yeah, maybe he should have packed a few extra things as he got older.
hmm.
So, do these stories that involve the more experienced hikers, do they strike you as more odd than the other ones, or
Um,
is it just all
it's
weird to you?
each situation. Looking at some of the stories that he's investigated, I focus mostly on the hunting ones that were there, just because it's kind of my interest, and I really enjoyed that documentary. But um, I think there's a lot of different facts. Like I was saying earlier, on what I would, the Bigfoot situation. Like I would place multiple bets on percentages of like, okay, it was an accident, 40%, supernatural, 10%. Um, they ran into somebody who was up to no good, and they've uncovered something on national land
Mm,
or on federal land because it is hard to get to, which we can broach that subject as well. Um, and they were dispatched because they saw something they shouldn't have.
interesting.
So
This
there's
did you watch that fuck, what was it called? The Green Triangle or something? It was like about pot growing in Northern
yeah, in
California.
California, yeah. So that's
Yeah,
kind of what
and
I'm
it was
referring to.
Sasquatch.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, it was no, it was called
Yeah,
Sasquatch or something because there were
yeah,
stories of Bigfoot. Fuck, I totally forgot this. There were stories of Bigfoot killing people, but it was really like people up there growing weed
yeah.
or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
That
it
was
it was
that was a
different
good one.
factions of growers, and the Bigfoot side, there was like a, little like the myth, the legend kind of thing going on, and then
Hmm.
people were like, "Oh, it also could be a bear." Well, then like people were intentionally putting, if I recall
Yeah,
correctly, like Bigfoot footprints out
yeah,
and destroying the
Wow.
fields
yeah.
to
They were
try and be
like,
like, "Yeah, Bigfoot's real, dude. Don't come up near our grow site."
yep, yeah. They were like really leaning into the. You'd have like people totally out of their mind on drugs talking about like, yeah, we saw Bigfoot just rip this guy limb from limb right in front of us, and
Yeah,
yeah,
That's
but more
pretty
to yeah,
wild.
yeah.
yeah,
That documentary is awesome. You should watch
it
it. It's really
is.
fun. That filmmaker, he's been doing a lot of stuff in Ukraine lately as well. He's pretty out there. But more recent years than that, because that was like a 80s 90s story, I believe, that he was following up on. More
Hmm.
recent years, there's been I think he's a wildlife officer. I don't know what California's setup is. It's basically a wildlife resources officer, a game warden in California who joined Love the Outdoors, trying to monitor hunting, fishing, stuff like that. Immediately, like you said, like late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even early 90s, immediately on these vast amounts of forest on state land, federal land, grow operations just started popping up everywhere. And it's
Mm,
essentially offshoots of cartels that have broached over into California,
Hmm.
and they are using banned, I assume pesticides, herbicides, one of the two, DDT, I think is one, anyway, or something, like using really bad, harmful chemicals to optimize growth on the state lands, and these guys are just like mules, hiking in
damn.
miles and miles of pipe, of PVC pipe, and diverting natural waterways
Oh
um,
shit.
to the grow sites that are in the middle, like miles and miles into the middle of the forest. So that's where like I reserve a piece of. Did somebody wonder? As a kid, a teenager on a scout program, we had to be very careful and leave a site and report it. We stumbled upon a meth lab in a cave as a group of scouts. So and that was kind of like, oh, and it was like in the evening too. So it was nighttime. Went in there. Somebody
Dang.
had this little homemade meth lab set up, and like, okay, we don't know where these people are at. This is not like abandoned a month ago. This is actively in use. We need to get out of here
That is
situation. So
scary.
that's why I reserve some of these stories to, okay, there could
Mhm.
be some,
That's
you know,
fair.
somebody got away with murder um, in the middle of the woods.
It reminds me of a story my father told me about him and his cousin going off fishing and drinking in the woods one day, and they got pretty deep in, and he had to take a leak. So he's like, "All right, I'm gonna be right back. I got to go take a leak." Goes into the woods a little ways and stumbles upon a moonshine still,
Hmm.
and immediately turns and he's like, "Hey, we gotta get the hell out of here." The reputation of people that are making moonshine in the hills of East Tennessee, um, not exactly the most savory folks. So, well,
No.
maybe they're out there making moonshine, making growing pot,
Mhm.
all sorts of stuff.
I had a family member in a similar situation in the late 80s, early 90s, walked upon a marijuana grow, and not too far from here. And I was just like, okay.
I feel like that's the scariest situation. Like, I would rather take Bigfoot than that kind
Mm.
of like,
Yeah,
I don't wanna stumble on that. I would rather
give
stumble on Bigfoot.
give me alien abduction
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I at least, I'm gonna learn something. It's gonna be like a revelatory experience for me. And maybe I'll survive. I mean, maybe not, but
It's an
at the very
adventure at
at the
least.
very least, it's an adventure. If I roll up on a grow farm from a drug cartel, I'm just gonna be mowed down where I
Yeah.
stand. They're gonna
Mhm.
chop my body up into a million pieces and dispose of me. So 0% survival rate there, it feels like.
Um, Going back towards creepier side of things though, I did so when I was looking on Reddit for I don't know anything because you have to like rent these documentaries to, and I'm not trying to do that. So there I did come across something called the Oz factor,
Yeah,
um, which is a term coined by ufologists and author Jenny Randles, refers to the experience of being isolated or transported by the real world of everyday life into another environment which is quite similar to the real world, but changed enough to be noticeable and disturbing. Which people mostly seem to be talking about this in terms of an eerie silence or like a change in surroundings, like a feeling of dread. Suddenly everything's really quiet and creepy. Like it almost
yeah.
feels like a zone has dropped over somebody while camping. Like there's no birds or bugs or anything.
Yeah, we talked about that with the creepy Reddit story, one of the Halloween specials we did where the guy like sees something from across the mountain and then notices like all of the bugs in the middle of summertime and all of the bugs have just stopped chirping
Oh God, was
and that
this
sort
your
of thing.
story in the first one?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
worst
I
one?
think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's also kind of like this idea that we talk about quite a bit when we're talking about cryptids and stuff on this show is like something that appears to be human but isn't quite human. It's sort of an atmospheric take on that where it's like
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
something doesn't feel quite right here.
Like I kind of wonder if it's almost like being watched. Everything
Yeah,
goes quiet and maybe you feel like you're being watched.
I I can understand that. I don't think I've ever experienced that situation in like a normal setting and then like, okay, something just got weird, but I do notice a drastic difference if I'm out, especially with hunting is when I notice it. I would much rather be out late at night hunting than that hike in super early morning getting set up. There is a completely different feeling
really
of
interesting.
post post dusk, post sunsetting darkness than pre-dawn
Huh.
darkness. And it
How
is,
would
and
you
maybe
explain that?
the being watched situation, very quiet,
Ah,
everything's asleep. And I've done it so many times that I also, kind of, you get when things are about to start waking up. Every animal kind of just kind of goes there, and I think that's probably all it is. But it is a very uneasy feeling because I also all my life have, you know starting at a very too young age, watch horror films and
Mhm.
supernatural films and all this stuff to where it's like
yeah.
that's in the back of my head of like, um, yeah, I'd rather take the post dusk, post sunset hike out than the pre dawn hike in.
That's interesting because I would think that the
I'm
woods at
solo.
night feel creepier, because I feel like humans have like an innate, they were diurnal. We don't want to be out at night. We get really paranoid of every little sound because our instincts are kicked up. And so that's weird. That's like the opposite of what I would have thought.
I think it is just because of that, the lack of activity. I think that's what it is. I think there's still so much going on late at night, past sunset, pre-midnight kind of thing. I think there's still enough activity going on, and maybe it's just a brain thing. I don't know, but the early morning quietness, the stillness, it can be creepy.
That's interesting.
All I know is if I'm ever out at my mom's place, and even when I was growing up, I was the same way. Like unless I was not alone, if I had somebody there with me, I was getting my ass in the house when it got dark. Because it felt weird. It felt like what's waking up in there and coming out to play for the night.
And I think a lot of people don't understand. Probably a lot of people don't understand too, is that as a society we've kind of moved into congregated housing areas, whereas that place you're talking about is you have lights on in the house, some floodlights around the house, and then a few yards past that it's darkness. And depending on how the moon is at night, past that light you're at, that's where you see in the movies where it's like, okay, what's beyond that light that's coming in? The scary noise is coming from there, that kind of stuff. And that's how I grew up too. It's a similar situation of there's like this protected little barrier of the house, and beyond that is no man's land, and it's creepy.
That's hard as hell. I'm gonna have to write that into a poem. Like, what's beyond the light that's coming in? That's good.
I think I'm just thinking now, like what like growing up, it's all movies and TV and stuff. That's all. It makes me think that, and it's Nickelodeon. It's Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes.
Goosebumps.
Oh man, Goosebumps ruined me. I mean, I would fly through Goosebumps whenever I was a kid, but they absolutely ruined me growing up in a place like that where I'm just a lot of isolation, especially back in the 90s. Now there's neighborhoods everywhere. There's not too much space left, but back then, man, I started on the Goosebumps and all kinds of trauma since.
Well, also, you're a bit more isolated back then too. We're like always connected now. It's almost hard to feel isolated.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Unless you go somewhere where you don't have signal anymore. And then that feels very different.
And then you're going to get lost or abducted by aliens.
I will say I did have a weird situation a year ago. So when I was out solo on a property I have access to, and where the camping, like where they want you to park and camp kind of situation is, there's no service at all. So that's just a weird feeling when you're by yourself nowadays. You don't have, when you can't contact, or if there's an emergency, you can't hear it or anything.
Yeah.
But there was something weird about that area. And this was post dark, early morning, hadn't even been a situation yet. And then I was looking on the map, just kind of like, okay, because my map still worked on the phone, or I had downloaded or whatever. And I saw that there's a logged cemetery like right next to where the parking area is, and this is way away from civilization. I was like, hey, why is there a cemetery? Like, there's no homes around. This is someone's farm, but I guess it's just an old family. But it's like a registered cemetery, and I was like, okay, this didn't make the situation any better.
No, cool. that would freak me out too.
That just reminds me. I remember. So this was back before people had smartphones. I think cell phones, but well, me and some people were under the influence, but we were in Mississippi, and so it was super dark, and we were going to something that was like a haunted cemetery, and it was it was winding road, and it was very dense trees and everything. We come around the corner, and like the second the headlights hit the cemetery, we're all like, nope. she turned around so fast, and we just left. But there's something about a cemetery in the dark. I don't know. Not one that's out in the middle of nowhere. One that's out in the middle of nowhere. A neighborhood one, or one that's, near a street or something, that's, moody. That's fun. But one that's in the middle of nowhere at night there's something worse about it.
Yeah. Like an accidental cemetery that you just stumble upon in the woods sounds mortifying.
Yeah. So I do have two stories here. One that's pretty normal, and one that's batshit crazy. So I don't know which one we should. I could start with the crazy one first.
I don't know. I say let's end on the crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Normal we can talk about, but I like for the show to get more unhinged as the longer it goes on.
Okay, so this one's not insane, but it was one that kind of kept coming up. People enjoyed this one for some reason. So, okay. So this one's about James McGrogan. He was an ER physician from Indiana. According to his friends and family, he was an experienced outdoorsman, snowboarder, marathoner, long distance biker.
Damn.
So you get the idea. But
A little bit of everything.
James, and I didn't put his age, but he's 30s maybe. He's not old. He's not super young. So James and three of his friends planned a boys' trip to Vail, Colorado to hike and ski. Vail is basically between Aspen and Denver in the White River National Forest.
I've never been, but I've heard it's beautiful out there. Ryan, have you been through that part of the country?
Yeah, I got stuck in that part of the country.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
Essentially where we were at. So yeah, I'm very familiar with this.
Okay.
Not the story, but I'm familiar with the area.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. That actually works out great. So because they flew in instead of drove in, he had to rent his equipment, which included split board with skins.
So that's like it's like a snowboard, but it's split, so you can ski or like cross country, or you can put them together like a snowboard. Yeah.
So for like cross country uphill skiing, like the skins also kept him from like going backwards if they were going uphill.
All right, so you could it's traction. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
He also rented an avalanche probe, avalanche beacon, shovel, and helmet.
I don't even know what an avalanche probe is.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a pole that breaks down. So if somebody's stuck and gets in an avalanche, you just kind of, everyone can do a different way, but kind of think the guidelines are kind of, if you're with multiple people, we kind of do a grid system, and you're literally probing the snow. They probably extend out to like 8-10 feet or more.
Dang.
So it's like a little, and it breaks down to the pole that's like probably that big, and you just extend it out, and you're just poking, trying to find somebody in the snow.
Oof.
Hope you don't need that one.
Yeah, avalanches scare the shit out of me.
He also had a backpack stuffed with food, water, medical supplies, GPS, cell phone, spare warm clothes, and other tools. It was vague. The plan was to hike.
Tools.
The plan was to hike up to Iceman Hut, which is 11,000 elevation, in an alpine hostel. They started the Spraddle Trail hike about 8 a.m. on March 14th, 2014, and it was 19 degrees. According to news reports, sometime around 9:30 to 10:30, the group stops to rest, but Jim decides to keep going. And he says, he'll meet them at another stop. Like he'll either stop farther up the trail or they'll just meet again at the hut. About an hour after they separated, Jim called for about 16 seconds and it went unanswered. So one of the friends, it says that he called them for 16 seconds, but
you're talking like phone call.
Yeah, right? Like a phone call. Like there was
yelling in the.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Like they saw it logged on. They weren't sure if it was picked up or not. I don't know. This was very vague information. But the group never caught up to Jim on the trail. And when they got to the hut around 5 to 5:30 p.m. and realized he wasn't there either, they called the police. So the search effort was immediate and intense because it is such a heavy tourist spot. Like you were mentioning, there's a lot of people there. So there's a lot of staff there too. They set up an 18 square mile search radius. Within 24 hours, they logged over 700 man hours and 24 blade hours from 2 helicopters.
Damn.
It was a fairly sunny day, light snow, but no accumulation. So you could reasonably expect there to still be footprints in the 3 to 8 inches of snow. Feet of snow? It's not going to be inches. It's going to be feet of snow.
You're asking the wrong person if you're asking
so
me.
like
I'd say 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but they found no tracks leading off the trail. So at this point, they're saying the trail is easy to follow because it's packed down.
Gotcha.
And then you have like your wall of snow off the trail. So they don't see any tracks going off the trail. Or if they do see tracks, they come back around. Like it's obvious what happened. And at any point, Jim should have been able to see Vale from the trail.
So it wasn't like this was necessarily remote relative to the town, correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, when I looked at a map, it didn't seem that out there. And
Okay.
it goes up. So they're saying like he should have been able to look down and see like where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So April 3rd, 3 backcountry skiers were in the Booth Falls area, which is about 4.5 miles east of the trail that Jim was supposed to be on. They found Jim's body under a 700-foot tall cliff face with ice fall. Cause of death was blunt force trauma consistent with the fall.
Okay.
Seems pretty
So
straightforward.
How far was it from the trail? Like 4 miles, did you say?
4.5 miles. But so the Booth Falls area was part of the search. It was close enough to be in their search range. But these trails are separated by a 12,000-foot ridge, so it would have been difficult for him to get there.
the insinuation being he didn't just wander off 4.5 miles east of the trail.
Or
Like,
that
it
yeah.
didn't make sense for there.
It's more, it's just like really weird.
Yeah.
I guess that's what they're saying. Like it should have always been very obvious where the path was, where he came from, or he could look back down, and where he would have ended up. It's like he should have known that he wouldn't be going up a 12,000-foot ridge.
Yeah, without seeing a map of like it's hard to say, but because I have a lot of theories going on of like, okay, he was clearly probably more advanced than the other guys he was with. And he wanted to go ahead. He was probably bored with their pace. He wanted to challenge himself. Okay, he easily could have been focused on that and kind of lost his bearings just from like, okay, I want to push up here and missed a turn or something. But it sounds like that's probably not possible on that trail. Another theory popped in my head. Maybe he made it to that cabin at a decent pace, called them, was like, hey, just check where they're at or whatever. Maybe he just want to check around the area, and maybe the vicinity of where that cabin's at, maybe it makes more sense of where he ended up. Maybe he continued somewhere checking it out, or wanted to continue a workout or something. And I've got nothing else. I don't know, other than a weird situation. I thought maybe for a second was, okay, what about the group of friends? Is there a secret they're trying to take to the grave that they've done something? But it's hard enough for him to make that trek, it sounds like, from where he went missing to where he was found. It's going to be even harder for people to carry a body that far and make it even weirder.
Yeah,
I think
and
there's easier ways.
If they were all together making the trek up to the hostel, I mean, if they're all accounted for, who's sneaking off to hide or dispose of the body?
The video did say nobody ever saw him make it to the hut. So, but I don't know, I don't know how big the hut is. I don't know how many people are coming and going and how close attention they're even paying to that. So Jim was found not wearing a coat, gloves, or boots. It sounded like the coat and gloves maybe were in his bag, like he got hot and took them off and put them in his bag, but they never found the boots.
Which is a pretty consistent thing with a lot of these stories, right? Go ahead, Ryan. I didn't mean to cut you off.
With hypothermia, there's a thing called paradoxical undressing, to where your body tells you you're getting hot and you strip naked. I would have expected there to be less clothes, so it's kind of weird that there's no boots.
I thought that too, because we talked about that with the
Dyatlov
Pass. Yeah. And they got like naked or in their underwear. So yeah, I was thinking the same thing. If I mean, maybe he just got warm. Maybe that's just kind of regular warm. I don't know. Maybe he's wearing multiple coats.
I mean, taking a coat off. Yeah, but I mean, without boots, like, did it say his skis?
The boots was weird. No. Oh yes. So okay. In the backpack, he still had the GPS and cell phone, which were both still functional. The boots were never found, but the board was returned to the rental store. It says there's no report of where it was found, though.
Ooh, that's weird.
So somebody returned the split board, but they never found
Could
his
have also
boots.
just been it is weird that they found the board though, and it's not mentioned. I feel like that would be a pretty big piece of the case.
And I think this
I
video
thought
that I
there's a pretty
watched,
big missing.
the video that I watched in particular, the Lore Lodge on YouTube, which was pretty interesting. I think he does kind of covers a lot of the 411 stuff. He made it sound like there was interesting information that was not made public, that normally should have been or would have been. So it seemed kind of weird that like they didn't even say where they found the board, or I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of want to look into that one and hear more. But it sounds like there's a lot of information that they're not released. So there might might not be any point. I'm probably just going to get more frustrated if I look into it. That's an interesting one.
And it is common that missing 411 victims lose their shoes.
Okay.
So do you know anything about that at all? Like why anybody would take off their shoes?
The only story that comes to mind involves other people, and that was that I believe it was. I'm pretty sure it was that. I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but it was the very well-known hate crime. I think his name was Adam. Maybe it was a homosexual man, and the two guys like forced him to.
Oh, in Wyoming, Cheyenne.
Was it? Maybe that's where it was. Yeah. They made a movie about it and stuff, but I feel like I think they made him. I may have made him strip naked, but for some reason it stuck out that like they made him take his shoes off.
Laramie.
Yeah, so I feel like if there was some, it's hard to imagine that this guy in this situation came across something to where people were like, "You've seen something you shouldn't have. Get walking. Take your shoes." Now, the taking the shoes off thing, like there's if you don't want someone to get away very well, take the shoes away from them for sure. If you can't find their feet, you take their shoes away. This situation, like it doesn't make sense. It sounds like it was not far from town. It's not heavily trafficked, regularly trafficked.
There's a lot of tourists.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But there's some weird people out there. Who knows?
It's true. Also in that Devil's Den, was that what it was called? Which
Devil's Den?
Okay.
Yeah, the Arkansas story we did.
Aliens tying the shoes.
Yeah, trying to figure all that out.
Aliens trying to tie their shoes back on. I don't know.
They're like, we can't.
People like to take off shoes.
We can't figure this shit out. Just chuck them. We don't need them.
And there's another story that brings up. Sorry, on this, like there was a situation in Alaska where these guys died in an ice situation, and all their clothes were beside them, boots carefully laid out, clothes folded, laid out. Well, I'm sorry, this was True Detective. Never, I'm go back.
I could see. So if you're, undressing, boots would come off as well. But and
I feel like more clothes would have come off too, though.
Like he was wearing leggings and whatever. Like he still had those on. But another theory that I saw people say was high altitude psychosis.
Man, I just don't know if they're if high enough to do that. I know everyone's oxygen intake is there, but 11,000 feet, you're at that barrier, but it's not quite extreme, from my understanding.
Extreme enough to make you start hallucinating, and
I will say that he was
wandering off.
I can't comment on that because I'm not an expert, but I will say maybe the added effect of how heavily he may have been working and pushing his body with the limited oxygen, that I guess that could have completely made him disoriented, and makes this make more sense. But without seeing the map, it's hard, but it sounds like there's a lot of professionals on the case, but also if they're withholding a lot of the information. The board thing is very weird, unless it was just hey, we found it. Hey, can you guys take it back since you got to return all your equipment too? And then whoever's working the booth clocked out and never came back, and nobody knows how the board got back. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Although I
like
guess in a fall shoes might come off too. Like
yeah.
don't they say, if you're in an airplane crash, you should wear well, I don't know why people are worried about what shoes they wear in an airplane crash. You're probably not going to survive. But that you want shoes that are tied. Like really paranoid people will have shoes that they can tie instead of slip-ons.
I guess it's a way to distract you from everything else that's going wrong. Now I would say, like, yeah, if he was still strapped, because it didn't say what type of boots they were. Like, were they specific ski boots for those skis? Like, if he had those on at the time of the accident or whatever happened, yeah, they're probably gonna come straight off. His feet are gonna come out of them, not them come off. Like, the boots have probably stayed in the skis and his feet slipped out. Um, I don't know. There's so many factors in this.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, that's maybe why people like that one, is because it should have been obvious staying on the trail, but he's an
Yeah,
experienced guy, so
yeah,
you
that
never
one's
know.
tricky. The elevation very well could have had a part of that. I was thinking that earlier when you said the height, and I was like, well, that's not too high. But if you're physically exerting, and he's out with his
Yeah, if you're getting
buddies,
tired.
how hydrated was he? Alcohol and
Mm,
hydration plays a major factor into altitude sickness.
okay. Yeah, I mean, if it was a guy's trip, I don't know. I don't know if they're drinkers.
I would, yeah, I can picture what me and some dudes would be like. Probably not the smartest idea to take off alone at 11,000 feet.
Well, and that made me think of like what you said earlier, if you're
Exactly.
experienced, you've done this kind of thing a lot. I mean, he's a snowboarder and you just get a little cocky. Like you're comfortable, you're
Mhm.
confident, and you make a mistake.
Yeah, and maybe not saying even cocky, and that's it, too comfortable. You
Yeah,
know,
too comfortable. Yeah.
So never be comfortable while you're camping. That's the
that's,
message we're taking away here.
you were taking the David Goggins approach. Stay hard. Isn't that his saying? Or is that
Yeah, I
campaigns?
think
I don't
so.
know. Okay.
Let's get to the crazy story,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I love this one.
So this is
No, I
Mount.
just want to say I liked that last one. That was good. That's a really
Okay.
interesting. Like, it
Yeah,
seems
that's a
simple, but very
solid one.
complex. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right, let's get
So
weird.
this one is for Mount Shasta. This is called the Mount Shasta Robot Grandma. Okay. So this is Shasta Trinity National Forest. It's in Northern California. It's a volcano that has a lot of stories surrounding it already.
I'm in.
Um,
Let's go.
There's an
From the jump.
indigenous folklore about a spirit chief who descended from heaven to the summit. There's also a story from a book published in 1899, A Dweller on Two Planets by Frederick Spencer Oliver, about Lemurians, which is a sunken continent similar to Atlantis. I don't know if Lemuria.
I've never heard of it before.
Okay.
But it's cool.
And so the Lemurians are survivors that live in an underground civilization in the mountain. Like the continent sunk, they moved to Mount Shasta. But it's described crazy, like jeweled walls and fur carpeted floors within the mountain. And occasionally Lemurians were seen walking the surface dressed in white robes. It's very cult kind of seeming.
Sounds kind of nice though.
I think you have a lot of hippies that are around there. It's supposed to be very like high energy kind of situation.
Okay. Yeah.
So all names have been redacted from the story. Allegedly, they told David, and he's the only source we have on it.
Ah.
So
I don't know that I love that.
yeah.
But
so this is October 2010. A family of 4 was camping on Mount Shasta. Around 6 p.m., the 3.5-year-old toddler and the sister, which is age unknown, were sitting by the fire. The sister turned, looking away, and when she turned back, the boy was gone. Family immediately got the rangers, and they started searching the area from about 6:30 to midnight. Then about 12:20-ish, 12:30, the dogs came across the boy hiding in a bush on the side of a trail they'd been over numerous times.
Okay.
So a couple of months later, the grandma was babysitting the boy, and he said to her, "I don't like other Cappy," which is what he called his grandma, whose name is Kathy or something. He called her Cappy. So he said, "What do you mean the other Cappy?" He said, "Don't you remember when I was lost on the mountain? Um, the other Cappy came and she took me to a cave which had a lot of spiders and guns and purses." So he went on to describe this person as being robotic, shimmering in the light, but she looked exactly like his grandma. And there were other robots, but they weren't moving. So the idea was maybe like mannequins or dead bodies, even. The robot said the boy came from outer space and had been implanted in his mother's tummy, and they needed to collect a stool sample. So the robot Cappy gave him a piece of sticky paper to collect his stool.
What are you? How are you collecting your? Were you just like rubbing some sticky
They
paper
want
up
him to
that?
poop on it. They want him to poop on the sticky paper.
Okay, all right.
But he didn't need to poop, so they did not get a sample.
I would have been
Ap-
too stressed out to poop too.
so, so the robot Cappy took him back down the mountain and told him to hide in the bush until he was found. The grandma said his description sounded more like a hologram, even though the boy used the word robot. So the way he was describing it sounded like a hologram.
Yeah.
Now, normally the grandma would have assumed this was just his wild ass imagination, but the father said the boy told him the same story and he had also ignored it. And the grandma had a weird story of her own.
At Mount Shasta.
Yes. So she said the year before, when she was camping with a friend, they kept seeing red eyes watching them from around their campsite. They'd shine their flashlight, the eyes would disappear, then reappear later somewhere else. In the morning, both Kathy and her friend woke up on the ground outside of their tent and camper with 2 small puncture marks on the back of their neck. They both felt sick, hungover, and dehydrated. And that's why I wrote, "This is so much like Devil's Den," because that's exactly
Yeah.
what happened to those 2 guys. It was like they got sun sick or something. Like they were both sunburnt and super dehydrated. Anyway, so yeah, that's that one.
Ryan, you're a father, so I want to ask you what your reaction would be if one of your kids looked at you and said they had a robot grandma.
There have been times when like the kids have said weird things,
Like really
like
creepy shit.
not super creepy, but like creepy enough to where it's like, okay, yeah, this is how movies are made. But I don't know where I would have followed that had the grandmother not gone there previously. It's like they copied her.
Yeah.
And this one's weird. I could go in a lot of directions with it, you know.
So my guess would almost be that maybe people did take him. Like maybe he did see somebody else. Maybe he
That
like
looked
kind of
like his
stumbled
grandmother.
away. I mean, if you're that young, how well can you tell old people apart?
Now, you think that from an adult rational mindset, but keep in mind, because I've noticed this with young kids, um, their memories are, for the most part, when they see things like that and people and little details here and there, super vivid memory because they
Okay.
don't have a lot of other nonsense
Mm.
to kind of fade that out. Like there have been some things, especially lately, that my son has like specifically said or pointed out someone's vehicle, like
Oh.
across the road, and like, hey, that's so and so's car. I'm like, dude, I don't see what you're talking about. He's like, no, not that one over there. I'm like, oh yeah, they saw it. It is. It's just little things like that that I don't know. I sometimes they're extremely accurate, but then other times
Hmm.
it might just, it's hard to say. I have two theories going in my head right now. When you were reading the story, I'm trying to rationalize it, saying, okay, is this some weird person or a weird group of people that are the hippie situation, living on this mountain,
Hmm.
and they are on a heavy supply of some sort of drug and are doing weird stuff. Doing the poop sample thing doesn't make any sense, and that's
No.
their mission with their drugs. But they've collected purse, they've killed people, who knows? And this is belongings to the people, and they didn't want to kill the kid, and they were like, "Here, go back here, just don't tell them where we're at." Or this is some sort of supernatural thing that is mimicking human behavior, trying to learn human behavior, collecting mannequins, purses, whatever, because
Yeah.
people carry purses and they're trying to mimic behaviors and things. And to further emulate what they need to do, they needed a different DNA sample, and they got this kid to shit. I don't know. This is very odd.
The guns and purses got
Yeah.
me too. That caught my attention because the plausible explanation is, okay, well, is there is it possible that there is someone or a group of someone's in the woods that are taking advantage of these tourists, like taking people's purses and shit and arming themselves with guns, and like maybe this kid wandered away and stumbled upon this, and like Ryan said, they're like, oh, we don't want to shoot a kid in the park, so
Mhm.
just go hide in this bush until we're gone away, and then you're fine or whatever. But there's also the added element of him being with his sister and her looking away for just a brief moment, and then he's gone. So that would imply she took his eyes off of him and he just decided then and there, I'm going to get up and walk away undetected. um it's just there's a lot when you start trying to piece it together that doesn't really fit that well.
So, Ryan, as a parent, how fast would you say your kid could disappear?
I think all kids could disappear pretty quick, and it depends
Okay.
on what's going on, the distractions, the environment, and all that. And those things do scare me.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing the story of the daughter, or because it didn't say how old the daughter was,
No.
the
Mhm.
sister. So that's where it's kind of tricky. Of okay, what's the feedback from her? How reliable is that information as far as like a timestamp?
Fair
Because
enough.
that could be a, oh, he was right here, I thought. So I've been in those situations with kids. I was like, oh, like the, my son's in the middle of doing something, and I'd change where I'm at or do something different, and I'll watch him, be like, hey, when's he gonna notice? When's he gonna notice? I think it'd be an hour, and then he'll finally
Mm.
notice. So that not knowing that time gap, it's hard to say of
Yeah.
like how quick this happened, how maybe she was severed. Because there's also times because I have a older and a younger, and there's times I'm like, hey, but it's your responsibility to watch the little one now, and I'll kind of keep an eye on him to the side, and I'll see that he's not doing that. He gets distracted very easily. I'm like, hey, what happened? Because I know exactly what happened, and I want his feedback from his perspective. And I'm like, okay, yeah, easily distracted, has no concept of time, has no concept of danger with her, and this and that. So without knowing more, it's hard to say,
Yeah.
what I think on him wandering off. I don't know.
And I also found it interesting that the kid wasn't really talking about it until what, a month or two later.
Well, to his grandma at least. So I don't know how when he saw his grandma. I mean, the dad did say, yeah, he told me the same story.
He mentioned that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
to the dad. But didn't say when. Yeah.
there
Mm-mm.
there are there are several of these stories that kind of toy along the lines of toy with the idea of other beings like protecting children.
Mm,
I heard one listening to the episode of Astonishing Legends on the Missing 411, where they kind of talked about a little girl that went missing, but essentially like the gist of it was like a Bigfoot was protecting her, like sheltering over her as if it were some sort of mistake, like, oh shit, this isn't our kid, but we can't just turn her loose into the wild. Like sheltered over her for a couple of days while a storm passed, and then they just took her, put her back at the campsite. So I don't know, it's the age, the kids being involved in stories like this kind of add a different dynamic to the conversation.
There are interesting stories where a kid will go missing and then they're found pretty much okay,
Yeah.
like a couple of days later. I
So
don't know if it's the same story because I have heard that one, or if it was another one that was very similar where it was like a bear took care of
the
this
bear,
kid.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, but that's because that's what she called it.
Okay, yeah.
But the way she described it was like, honey, that ain't a bear. So Bigfoot, naturally. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
yeah. Yeah. This one's tricky.
I have heard Mount Shasta is a very strange place, though. Maybe
I've heard
Leyland. I
another
don't know.
story that I don't know what it pops out though. I don't know if that maybe that was in that documentary we're talking about with
It might
the
be.
cannabis. Maybe it was from that because it's kind of in the same area, but it might be something else. But something with Mount Shasta has popped up before as well. But that reminds me of not to. Are we still on that story, or are we?
Yeah.
We've hit
Yeah.
the end of the agenda at this
Okay,
point.
that's what I assume. I just one thing I wanted to touch on with the documentary from this guy on the hunter one was a
Mhm.
story of the Crazy Mountains in Montana, and it's a range I would like to
Ooh,
visit because the
I'm
range
in.
is
Let's
called the
go.
Crazy Mountains. I took some notes when I was watching because I wanted to remember the myth. This was according to someone in the documentary. This was the myth of the Crazies was so it is a range that's separate from the Rockies, and I don't remember if it's younger. I think it's the youngest range in that area, or maybe in the North America, but um, doesn't seem like it's that young. But anyways, it's its own range separate from the Rockies in Montana, and the myth that they have in the area was it was a curse from the Crow Indians when they were removed from the land.
Ah,
The curse was that the Crow Indians put a curse on the mountains for the wind to blow so hard and constant all the time to drive the white man crazy. And
Hmm.
there's been a lot of occurrences of disappearances and stuff in the crazy mountains, and that's one of the stories they covered in the documentary was on that. But one thing that was odd that he points to, and he probably does in the other things as well, is that, and it kind of goes in with the conversation of the cave system and stuff, is that a lot of these occurrences are similar situations within close proximity of each other, and that's where things get too coincidental.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I was gonna say. Like, eventually, the similar stuff, similar accounts pop up from the same region over and over. I mean, how long before a pattern really develops? And you kind of, I don't know. I mean, you can't help but wonder: there's something there connecting them all?
Mm.
Well, how often do people fall into caves and then you can't find them?
And that was kind of my thought on that because I didn't know where we were going with the first story outside of Vale. Was maybe there was a snow cave or some sort of deep hole that he got stuck into, but eventually someone's going to find. But that was not the case. They did find him off the side of the cliff. So, but those situations fall into a cave or fall into a, on a mountainside if you're in an avalanche situation. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
how
All
many
right.
miles of caves have not been mapped either? So,
Mm. Well, I mean, there's a story of that Mormon guy who killed his wife and then his children and himself, but they have an idea of like the cave that he put her in, and they haven't even been able to find her. Like,
oh yeah,
even if you kind of know, you can't find people. You can't really go into some caves
yeah,
or
Man,
they
that's
might
dark.
collapse.
yeah. And what's weird is like I grew up and it's something I want to do with my kids, but just the chances of being able to do it, and I don't know. My father was heavily into spelunking in his early adult life, and he kind of carried that over as we were kids. And I can remember maybe they stand out more, but I felt like we went caving a lot as a kid, like a little kid, and like some awesome memories of just exploring through caves. Um, but it also can be a very like you turn off the light and it
Oh, it's
is
so
you
dark.
don't know pitch black. It is pitch black, and it doesn't take long for it to affect your vision. If you're stuck in
Mhm.
there, um, yeah, it's scary stuff.
Did
Yeah,
you
I'm
ever
out.
take any school trips to a cave? Like, I remember taking a school trip to a cave in Tennessee.
You
I
probably
don't
went to
remember which one,
Cumberland Caverns. Probably that was kind of the
maybe.
go-to.
I remember like dragging behind the group so that it would seem more dark.
Mm.
um, no, it's very dark. No, that's just scary. Mm-mm.
No, I get anxiety when we go to like Ruby Falls or something.
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
I can't do this. But I'm 6'2", 292 pounds. It doesn't take much for me to feel
Mhm.
claustrophobic. But I do remember being a kid and going to family reunions at Cedars of Lebanon State
Mm.
Park, and they've got some caves in there, and you could like crawl up and you're not too deep into the cave before you start feeling your chest is on the cave floor, and then you can feel the roof of it scraping your back.
Oh God.
And
The entrance
I
to that
never,
cave is really tricky, and if there's been too much water activity, then it's not passable past like pretty much the first part.
yeah, I did it once and was like, no, I can't do it. It's just not.
Mm.
I'm not cut out for this.
We should do a Sobros cave trip, but to a better one. I've got a couple in mind that have very large openings that are really cool. That
As
are
long as
on
it ain't,
state land now.
long as it ain't the Bell Witch Cave, I'm good
Yeah,
with
I'll
that.
go there.
No
I'll go
interest.
there.
Yeah, I'm out on that.
And go find some creatures, whatever that cave horror movie is. The Blind
Is it
I
the
don't know what you're
creatures.
Descent?
talking about.
Yes, I think it's Descent,
Descent,
where it's
yeah.
like a girl cave trip.
Hmm.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
What a great bachelorette party.
I know.
We should
Yeah.
we should write that film of like, yeah, this is The Descent was about a serious group of outdoors women, and this
Mhm.
is like the Nashville bachelorette party. All the bars are full, so what's the next thing? Go to Bell Witch Cave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it. All right, guys, we got to the end of our agenda. Ryan, you
We
got
did.
any parting thoughts on this
I
topic
don't.
before we
I
get
don't.
out of
There's
here?
so, like I said, there's so many things, possibilities, and all these stories, and but I think there are some out there that are totally intriguing, that do not make a natural, rational sense, that are worth
Yeah,
investigation. And then, I hope that some of these that are still unsolved, I hope the families can get some sort of closure at some point if we can
for sure.
piece together what's happening through technology and things down the road.
Yeah, to give everybody a sense of how vast this topic is, we've been talking for an hour and 17 minutes, and we've
Mhm.
given like an introduction to what the topic is, and we've talked about 2 stories.
There's so many.
Yeah.
I think there's like several documentaries. Like I think there's the main one, and then like Ryan said, that he's got that hunter hiker one.
Yeah.
Like there's different offshoots. Even there's so many stories.
Rooster, any parting thoughts from you?
No, I mean I don't like going out in the woods. I don't like.
You're
I'm
not.
never going off a trail.
No. Okay.
No.
Well, I guess you'll never encounter robot grandma.
No, I mean I take it too seriously. That shit scares me. Like I wouldn't. And if I get lost, I'm just gonna assume that I'm dead.
Yeah, it's like we've talked about with the zombie apocalypse. Like
Yes, exactly. Like I'm giving up. I'm like, well,
if the
this is my
apocalypse,
fate.
yeah, if the apocalypse happens, I'm finding the nearest building to jump off of. I'm
Yep.
just going to save myself the trouble.
Yeah.
Just get on out of here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what, you end up in a situation like this. It's like, well, here's a cliff. Might as well.
I
Well,
don't
That
no.
should
know.
be you could write another story on that of like your quest to end your life in the zombie apocalypse, but your quest to find a building tall enough, you survive along the way.
I like
And-
that.
and it's like
That's a good idea.
What do they call it? Not coming of age, but like a finding yourself in
Yeah.
the zombie apocalypse. But one that I just want to say, back on subject, be prepared. Just gonna go back with the old motto there. Carry a
Good
pocket
advice.
knife.
Yeah.
Make sure you have appropriate clothes and water.
And if you can't respect your surroundings, just don't go. If you can't
Yes.
keep yourself
Oh,
together,
yeah.
just don't go. Like,
Mhm.
can you imagine us taking like Brandon on a very serious like expedition where he would be trusted with stuff? No, we would be having another podcast about
Well,
Brandon.
he could now. He seems more adult now. He could do it, maybe. I believe in Brandon.
Okay.
He wouldn't want to. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that too.
Like we would have to make him, and that would not be fun.
No, that's probably not a good idea.
It'd be like we're on like a backcountry road in between heading somewhere, and like to the riders retreat, and there's a car breaks down, and even
Yeah.
walking on the road is probably going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Brandon and Rooster. Can you imagine what you're going to take both of them?
We're just going to sit down. We're going to sit down on the side of the road.
All right. Well, Ryan, where can our viewers follow you on social media these days?
Outdoor Sobro. Have content and stuff is a little slow right now for what I've got going on in life, but
Some great
um,
fiction on SobrosNetwork.com,
we
though.
are. Yeah, I have taken a step back and trying to focus on one thing at a time, and I've got some things lined up down the road, and um, you know, just stay tuned.
If if you're into this sort of thing, go to SobrosNetwork.com and search in the search bar "The Widow's Mountain." Fantastic story,
It was very good.
authored by Ryan. Yeah, that I still want to see as a film. I think
Me
you're
too.
onto
I would
something
watch
there.
that. I would watch
Yeah,
that.
we need to have like a brainstorm session, post-it notes and a whiteboard. Because I
Yeah,
wanted to like when it was a dream. We're getting off subject. It was like an '80s fun yet scary horror film in my
yeah,
dream.
yeah.
Like like the
Best
bright
kind.
ski suits of the '80s and '90s. But it was also really intense. Like I don't want to ruin it, but like the bad character in it was like running full speed around the hotel situation, but like is an old lady too. So it's just that scary aspect of things that shouldn't
Unnatural.
happen. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's fun.
And also search Battlefield New Mexico. I'm still waiting on a chapter 2 for that
I
one.
was
It's a
thinking
good
about that
story.
this week, but part of my scaling back is I am focusing on one story at a time.
There you
And
go.
the
That's the way to
current
do
one
it.
is a novel, so
Oof.
Yeah.
we're working on it.
I just realized that we're all three fiction writers here on this
Yep.
show. Yeah. I got a new story coming out um Thursday. Thursday it'll be out. But I've written some stuff, and then of course we have Consumed by Rooster.
Yes,
Wait, is it actually no, it's under your
it's on
actual name.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
it's on
Consumed
Amazon now
by
too, right?
Roxanne Chase on Amazon.
On
Yep.
Amazon. Yeah. Look at us. Look at
Yep.
us. Just three authors talking about missing 411.
Yep.
All right. Rooster, where can our viewers, our listeners find you on social media?
At Rooster_Chase on everything, everywhere, all of it.
When's your next story dropping?
I don't know. I get halfway through something and I hate it. Or I
Yeah.
write a scene and then I'm done.
I got you. I got you. Yeah. I've got I just checked the other day. I have 16 different writing prompts where I've got like an idea that I've just not touched. Some of them like years.
Yeah. I've got like 4 different scenes that are all very different, have nothing to do with each other.
But damn it, I'm gonna stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning to finish the Chromeo story.
Oh, yeah. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. That's going to do it for this episode of Phone It In. I am at Stony Keeley on Twitter, collectively at Sobros Network on all major social media platforms. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Phone It In wherever you take in your podcasts. Check out, listen, there have been a lot of episodes from the back catalog that have come up in today's episode. We've got an episode on Devil's Den, Skinwalker Ranch. Did Teddy Roosevelt invent the national park system to protect people from Bigfoot? And there is even an episode on Dyatlov Pass in the archives as well. So go check it out. Phone it in wherever you take in your podcast. SobrosNetwork.com, SobrosShop.com. Word on the street is there might actually be a new design coming soon to Sobros Shop. So it's been a minute, but we're back at it. And then, of course, you can sign up to get my coverage of the NFL draft and the Tennessee Titans through Stacking the Inbox, along with all of our premium Sobros content, including the Movie Review Rewind podcast and much more at the Sobros Substack as a part of Stacking the Inbox, stackingtheinbox.com. There you go. That's all we're working on. I think I got everything out today. So for Outdoor Sobro, Ryan, thank you for joining us, by the way. This has been delightful.
Thanks for having me. I've been, I've off and on, I've been interacting with you guys' show for a while in the comments when I can, and I genuinely look forward to when you guys are doing these shows. You've had a lot of good topics. I'm what's the word? delighted that you had me on.
There we go.
What's-
All
what am
right.
I thinking of? Anyways, I can't think of words right now. I'm done.
Our
Yeah.
first
Flattered.
caller. Thanks for
Flattered. How
calling
about that?
in. Yeah.
Thanks for phoning in. Phoned it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, for Ryan and for the Cryptid Queen Rooster, I am Big Natural Stony Keeley. And until next time, you stay classy, phoners.
Bye.